But let's focus on Budget 2017, the day that Arun Jaitley delivered his fourth big union budget. And I want to start with the 4 or 5 big takeaways from Mr. Jaitley's budget. People with 3 lakhs don't need to pay income tax. 10% surcharge for those earning between rupees 50 lakhs and 1 crore. Political parties to receive cash by check or digital mode. Donations exempt only up to 2,000 rupees. Tax on up to 5 lakh income reduced to 5% from 10%. And as I said, only 2,000 rupees now allowed in political funding is allowed in cash. Let's listen in first to what the finance minister had to say, some of the big points from his budget speech. We have special guests who've been waiting patiently, and I'm going to ask for your endurance to wait for a little while more, because we have 2 more guests joining us as we rate the budget. The 5 big takeaways I've given you. Rajiv Pratap Rudy of the BJP and Sachin Pilot of the Congress are joining me right away. I want to ask you, Mr. Sachin Pilot, the Congress seems to believe there is nothing right about this budget. You claim to be a farm leader. The government has put 48,000 crores in Manrega, says they will put 10 lakh crores in rural infrastructure. Why do you believe this government has not done enough for farmers?
Well, I was hoping for something a lot more spectacular for the farm sector, simply because post-demonetization, the people who suffered the most were people working on the farmland, farm laborers, daily wages. And I think by extending the limit of farm credit is not going to help the farming community at all. The fact that the government first criticized Narega thoroughly in 2014 and now has come back to supporting it, I think is a sense of satisfaction for me and many people in the UPA government. The government, I think, also did not do any big reform that was expected, because don't forget, Rajdeep, this is perhaps they have 1 more full budget before we have the Lok Sabha polls, and time is running short. From bullet trains to smart cities to Stand Up India, Skill India, Swachh India, Digital India, there's so many Indias they wanted to create. This was perhaps the most opportune time to come out in the open, be transparent about the post-demonetization data as to the way forward for tackling black money. I have to, however, say, I do support the government's initiative of cleaning up political funding. This reducing of cap of cash donations, I think, is a welcome step, but it must be coupled with a lot more reinforced efforts about making it cleaner. This reducing the cap alone may not be enough, but I'm fully in favor of cleaning up the political funding of all parties across the board. The only last point I want to make is that the defining agenda of the budget ought to have been jobs, jobs, and jobs. You can look at the economic survey. It's in clear contradiction to what the finance minister has outlined this morning. There is a negative effect on the economy, 1 percentage point GDP shrinkage, lack in demand, consumption is shrinking. So they should have really incentivized the service and the manufacturing sector and really given out something to the farmer, because there are the chronicle and the endless debt traps, and suicide is still continuing unabated, irrespective of states. It doesn't matter which state it is in. But the government of India really today had the opportunity to come out as the defender of the people who have been hurt the most, who are really the poorest of the poor. You've got to take care of the corporate sector and the industry, but let's not forget the people who need our support the most are the ones who are the most vulnerable in our society, and that, I think, unfortunately didn't pan out as we had thought.
Rajiv Pratap Rudy, the opposition charges that this is a missed opportunity. I heard, and this is not just the opposition, even industry is saying, how is growth and investment going to kickstart? Demonetization has already set back industry by a couple of quarters, and the fear is this budget hasn't done enough to arrest the fears of big industry in particular, and also some say small and micro industry. Yes, you've given them some tax breaks, but not enough. How will you quickly respond as the Minister for Skill Development? Because here you've got Sachin Pilot saying the priority should have been jobs, jobs, jobs. Will enough jobs be created by this 2017 budget?
Well, what Sachin said is what they have been saying, whether it was this budget or even beyond this budget, nothing new. I wish he would have put things in a better framework too. But it is in the opposition. His job is to say what he feels, and I think I appreciate that part of it. But coming back to what you say is, there is one distinct feature of this budget which I would feel is the framework of this budget. It has a lot of clarity as what we want to achieve. The contention of the opposition, whether you will achieve it or not, is a question which we have to see, and they have every right to say what they want to say, but the boundaries are well defined. And when I say the boundaries are very well defined, we also know that 2 major steps which have been taken. One is moving for the GST. The second is demonetization, and it does have an impact. But at the same time, this was a
Mr. Rudy, jobs. Sorry to intervene, sir.
It was
jobs.
a call taken by the Prime
Please
Minister.
tell me, how are jobs? How is this budget going to create more
coming
jobs?
Back to it. Do you have the patience?
Of course, I'm very patient nowadays.
Okay. Now, I'm coming to that. You must understand the background. You heard him talking about politics. Sachin was speaking. I was also hearing that. That is what what I am saying is, when we talk, the structure is very well placed. And when this is the first time possibly that we knowing very well the effects of demonetization, the investment may not be coming forth as much as it could have been expected. And this government on its own has taken this, the onus itself, that it would do the investments on infrastructure and on the rural side, and as well as on the urban side and the social infrastructure on its own budgetary head. And that is why when we say 10 lakh crores in the agriculture sector, or when we say 65,000 crores in the road sector, what does it mean? When you are investing 60, whenever there is a investment, there is employment generation, and you spend 65,000 crores, the job gets generated there and there. When you look for people who have to come on the roads, whether it's a bar bender, whether it is a mason, whether it's an electrician, whether it is a concrete mixer, whether it is the hydra operator, whether it is the crane operator, whether it's a dozer, all categories of jobs get triggered off when you invest. And government has not just dependent on a PPP mode or other modes, it's going on investment, hardcore investments which it has planned, and that is the very basic purpose of generating employment. And I think the spectrum is absolutely, the scope is absolutely clear, and we have to appreciate that this government has taken a decision on the economic front which possibly could have led or has led to a certain periodical slowdown, but in the long term, the distinct advantages of the decision taken on the economic front, whether it's GST or for that matter the demonetization, would lead to a better structured economic framework where there's more transparency,
right,
where the revenue flows and the system is much more mature. And I think this had to happen in the system someday. Possibly the previous government could not gather courage. We have done it. Let's see how it moves.
I'm going to ask you both very quickly before I come back to my panel here. The biggest strength of this budget and the biggest weakness. What is the one thing, Sachin Pilot, that you wanted to see that didn't happen? Very quickly, 30 seconds.
Well, like I said, I was expecting some sort of a help or financial support to the unorganized sector, people who are daily wage earners, who earn every day and feed their families at night. Those are the ones who have been most hit. So there really was nothing for the unorganized sector, for the farming community, a financial package or something to say that they've got so much money back in the banks because of demonetization process. That money could have been leveraged to help the lives of the people who deserve it the most. This tinkering of tax rates by 2, 4, 5%, I think is not going to make a paradigm shift in the ecosystem of our economy. The government could really leverage this opportunity to have done a lot more for the 45, 50 crore who are really today are making efforts to make two ends meet. That was clearly missing in the finance minister's budget speech.
30 seconds, Mr. Rudy. The one thing that you believe will actually kickstart this economy, the fear that industry is expressing again and again on our program since morning, what has been done to enthuse us? What is the one thing that you believe that this budget has done that you believe is radical, is revolutionary, will actually kickstart the economy?
You see, when Sachin says when Sachin says the banks are flush with the money, of course, and this would have a triggering effect straight away, as you'll have more money, the lending rates would be lower, the liquidity would be more, and the moment the industry would be in a better position to leverage this whole funds which have flown in. Of course, what he says is a point which he holds, and we cannot deny it, but this big picture which we see in this budget is possibly a very transparent one. When we have moved for reforms both on the economic front, on the social front, on the political front, is a framework which actually is exciting the nation, and it's a clarity. We have not left the farmers, we have not left the youth, we have not left skilling, we have not left education, and we have not cut on subsidies. We have talked about infrastructure, we have talked about rural infrastructure, and this is a plan which and inclusive growth is what we have aimed at.
Right.
And the purpose is very well defined, but we are talking. He may have his reasons to say that the poor has not been addressed, but this question has to be asked from a poor man, whether these questions have been addressed or not.
Okay, let me leave it there. Rajiv Pratap Rudy, Sachin Pilot, appreciate your joining us here at the top of Rate the Budget. Okay, let me come straight to the panel. 30 seconds each, gentlemen, and then I'll move back to some of the other guests who will be joining us. Ashok Lahiri, former Chief Economic Advisor. You have a chart in front of you. 0 to 5, how do you rate it? What is it about this budget that you think is the big strength, the big weakness?
I'll stick with my earlier thing of between 4 and 4.5.
You're still giving it a very high rating,
Yes.
between 4 and 4.5 out of 5.
Let me make 4 quick points. One, I don't understand when people say that this kickstart the economy. This hasn't taken too much risk. An economy which is growing at 7%, one of the fastest growing economies, it's not that we are in the deep depth of a recession. Yes, we have to create jobs, but there is not too much scope for taking risks because the economy is growing. Of course, jobs are not being created. Second, if you look at how the corporates have behaved, you look at BSE Sensex or NSE, I don't go by those indices, but it has rallied by about 2 percentage points. Mid cap has rallied the most, small cap has rallied a little less, and even big cap has rallied
You
by 1.86.
never know what tomorrow will bring, though. You never
That's
know
okay.
what tomorrow will
No,
bring. But you believe, therefore, it is a budget that has made no major mistakes.
Let me make two
Quick
other
points.
points. Two other points. Okay. The political funding. Political funding, I agree with the political analysts who have said it's a great move. Will it solve all the problems of political corruption? No. It's a marginal move. You always tinker at the bottom. And last, demonetization, I'll come to later.
Okay,
There are some.
let's come to political funding. Mr. Arun Kumar, Professor Arun Kumar of JNU, you've been the one who's been raising this issue that the government steps on black money post demonetization, not enough. Now that the government has made this step on political funding, put a cap of 2,000 rupees on cash donations, said they will bring in election bonds. Do you believe they've done enough? Quick answer.
No, I believe they haven't done enough because this 2,000 is only one part of the election funding.
Right.
The rest comes for illegal activities for which you cannot use formal funds that have come. And therefore, what will happen is that the other funds will keep on coming, which are not declared at all in the returns of the parties. And this will only affect...
You don't think this is a good first step?
No, it's a first step, no doubt, but it's not something that will solve the problem. But I think more than that, the problem that has come up is that where is the growth coming from, which is implicit here, 11.75% growth. Now, if the 11.75% growth is not there, then your revenue projections would not be right. And if the revenue projections are not right, then your expenditure patterns will be affected. And therefore, what the government hopes to achieve through this budget would not get achieved. So I think the big thing is the big macro picture that's coming out, which is not very transparent and not very clear.
Okay, Nitin Desai, senior economist, your first reactions. You've got that number. What's the number that you're going to give?
I'd say that it is exactly the number I would give in a term paper written by a student, which is nice, sensible, but not very exciting. So this is a very prudent, sensible budget, and probably the country needs that right now. It has been disturbed by demonetization, and at this point, I'm glad that there is no dhamaka in the budget.
So it's a conservative budget.
It's a conservative budget, clearly drafted done by the finance ministry officials, and the minister has not done anything over adventurous in this budget. There are a couple of things which are
The adventure took place on November 8th. Once that adventure took place on November 8th,
it's a Munim ji's budget.
it's a Munim ji's budget. I like the word. It's a Munim ji's budget, says Nitin Desai. Sorry, Mr. Shah, your sense, the Swaraj Abhiyan of which you're a part, and you all have brought out a alternative Krishi budget today.
Yes.
What is it for the farm sector? Everyone is saying, or the Prime Minister is saying, I have bet big on rural India. Do you accept that the Prime Minister has done much more for rural India in this budget, and indeed in 2016, to finally allay that image that this was a suit boot ki sarkar, as you and others would allege 2 years ago?
Rajdeep, very quickly, and I always get into this bind in your studio.
Yes.
You say something completely different from what I want to say.
Yes.
There was no budget for the farmer or the rural sector today. Here are my quick points.
Yes.
Income increase, big talk. Credit, fib. Interest subvention, down. Figures, I have figures, I can prove it to you. Fasal Bima Yojana, down. Irrigation, only corpus fund. Dairy, fib. Antodaya Mission, big talk. Narega, I was in court. Narega has increased by 1% and Narega's actual demand is 80,000 crores. 48,000 crores is a cut down on the actual requirement of Narega. What's missing? Income security, not there. And what no one has told you is that after 2 droughts, when this year the farmer had a good crop, you hit him with demonetization. This is now a government-led disaster. And
you don't think the farmer has been cushioned by this budget from the impact of demonetization with all these outlays that have been made? You believe the outlays are actually a fib. That's the word you're using. The 48,000 figure, I know some are questioning it, that the actual figure rise is actually very marginal. I know that. You believe that's not enough.
The states have demanded 80,000 crores. It's a demand-driven program. It's not something that the central government can decide.
Can I get
it's a guarantee. You have to give that money.
Can I get you, Mr. Bedi, as the founder of MobiQuick, I want to understand from you the digital economy. The fact is there's a cap now 3 lakhs on cash transactions. And there is a push, as the minister also told us a short while ago, on pushing digital India. Do you believe this budget will actually give an impetus to the idea of digital India, or is it also, as some farm leaders are suggesting, a bit of a fib?
No, I think in the history of independent India, this is a budget where the word digital and the word payments has probably been mentioned the highest number of times ever since we got independence. And I think to me, that's a very, very good start. There have been a lot of macro measures, including service charges, including cap on cash transactions, including, for payments, there is a separate payments regulatory board that has been set up, which I think is going to be a very bold step, especially for non-banks to step into the digital payment economy and support the payment economy. So
you see companies like yours getting an impetus as a budget like this?
Of course we do. Of course we do. And we see that there is already a big this government, a change that I've seen, since last couple of years, the reforms are going in one direction, and they are consistent, and they get implemented on the ground. So across the government, there is a machinery across different ministries, across verticals, petroleum. For example, some of their entities like petroleum or education or healthcare, they are all focusing all of their own entities.
I'll come back to that because that's one view. The other view is there's a lot of talk and there isn't enough action on the ground. That's the other view. Subhashish Gangopadhyay, first rate the budget for me and then tell me what for you has been today's biggest strength and weakness of this budget as a former economic advisor to the finance minister.
Well, in the morning I had rated it at 4, so I'm not going to change that. It will stay on.
You're still putting it at a 4. Okay.
But I do want to make a point, right?
Yes.
That is about this Manrega.
Yes.
Now, as far as the Manrega demand is concerned, there is no reason for the demonetization to affect the Manrega disbursements because they're supposed to be done through the banking system, right? And it is interesting to see that if you look at states like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana we saw,
yes,
right, where there is a huge increase in demand in November, December this year over the last 2 years, November, December in Manrega, and that demand was met. In UP, there was huge demand and nothing was met, but UP doesn't have bank disbursement of Manrega. So I think when we bandy these figures around, we should look a little bit closer and not look at, because all of these are state issues.
What is the biggest strength of the budget?
The biggest strength of the budget, I think, is the tax on the salary income tax.
You believe that they...
Yes, because they are the bigger spenders compared to the 50 lakh plus.
So it will spur demand?
Absolutely. And it is across the board, mind you, even those who are barring their surcharge, right?
Yes.
This helps everybody across the board.
Okay, so you believe there will be that trigger to domestic demand?
No, but I don't think the demand is what is holding back everything. The demand has to be generated by much larger public investments.
Which we don't know whether that will happen or not.
Well, if they're implemented, it will happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk, particularly on infrastructure, whether that will be implemented or not. Let me put 5 big questions. N.K. Singh joining me, now with the BJP, but also in charge of the panel that reviewed the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. Also, Yogendra Yadav is with us. Arvind Virmani, another former chief economic advisor, is also with us. First, you, N.K. Singh. Are you satisfied? Do you really believe the government will live up to that 3.2 commitment that they made, 3.2% fiscal deficit when it comes to GDP? Do you believe, therefore, that the government will ensure that its expenditure remains under control, given the pressures that it will have to kickstart investment, to kickstart growth, to provide more money in people's pockets?
Well, let me say, Rajdeep, let me say that if there was any government which believed in continued fiscal consolidation and macroeconomic stability, it has been the NDA government. The first FRBM Act was enacted in 2003 at the time of Mr. Vajpayee. That's the act which exists today. I chaired the committee to review that act and have submitted the report to the finance minister on the 23rd, about which he has spoken at some length today. As he said, that we had recommended 3% for the next 3 years, but he has opted, for reasons which are very credible, 3.2% is marginally higher than the 3% recommended by my committee, and then also taken on a commitment to get back to 3% next year. They are going to achieve 3.5% this year. Nobody believed that they would come down from 3.9 to 3.5%. And I think that their record in adhering to the path of fiscal consolidation and adhering to fiscal commitments has been quite exemplary, in sharp contrast to what happened during UPA 1 and UPA 2, where first a pause button was put on the fiscal roadmap, and then of course for 4 years it went out of hand with fiscal stimulus of one kind or the other. So I think I wish to answer your question very categorically in the affirmative, that I'm fully persuaded and and that I believe this is the government which will adhere to the fiscal target which it has taken upon itself.
Let me get in more views. Two economists joining us, Arvind Virmani, former Chief Economic Advisor and Chief Economist for JP Morgan, Sajid Chinoy. I want quick responses from you, gentlemen. First to you, Sajid. Your sense, do you believe that this budget will actually revive growth in the investment cycle, or do you believe it's a missed opportunity?
Rajdeep, I think we're asking the wrong question, and I think we need to look at the larger global context of what's happening. The world's become a very scary place the last 3 or 4 months for emerging markets. India has had $10 billion of outflows, which is the largest in the last 4 years. So really, the fundamental criteria for this budget was to take the Hippocratic Oath, which is to do no harm, and to give and not give the impression that India will trade off macroeconomic stability for growth in a very dangerous environment. Now, judged by that criteria, I think the budget did very, very well. I think the fact is that, as Mr. Singh said, the fiscal deficit is coming down. The finance minister has tied his hands for the next budget as well to 3%. We have held on to public investment. CapEx has grown 25% budget on budget. The quality of expenditure has become better, and revenue assumptions on the tax side are very realistic. So from a macroeconomist perspective, this is as good as it gets. The primary goal had to be to convince the international community that India, in the bid to stimulate growth, will not compromise on macro stability. And given those constraints, I think the budget's done very well.
So how much are you giving it on 10?
I would say 8 or 9. I would have liked to see more ambition on corporate taxes under the roadmap, and I would love to see more visionary thinking on resolving the non-performing assets on the banking system. So that's the reason I would give it probably 8. But I think given all the constraints and given all the pressure to mount this large consumption stimulus after demonetization, that would have been exactly the wrong response. I think it's very creditable that the government was restrained for a second successive year.
Let me get a quick response. Arvind Virmani, your first response. What do you believe? What do you believe has been the biggest strength and the biggest weakness of this union budget?
So, rating or evaluation depends on one's benchmark. And the benchmark that I set was post demonetization was that how will the negative effects of the demonetization, the short-term effects, be minimized, and even more importantly, what are the potential benefits would be made sustainable and long-term. So basically I identified 3 potential benefits. One was I expected voluntary compliance to increase during the year, and I went on to say that income tax reform was absolutely essential to make this sustainable and going into the future. So that part has been met. The personal income tax reduction, I think, was very important to signal that those who are honest taxpayers will will be favored in one way or another, and that's the best way to do it, to change the incentives for being an honest taxpayer. The second one was in terms of real estate, and I expected that the black element of the prices and of real estate would go down, and then one identified a number of policy reforms and others things related to it, which would again do the same sort of thing about sustaining. And again, number of measures have been announced in this budget which take that show that the government was seized of this matter and is taking it seriously to try and promote white housing, if you will, whether it's for the poor or whoever. And finally, the third point we made was that there are things unconnected with taxation or real estate, which is the general corruption in the economy, and one of the most important things which needed to be done there was to start with political funding and political corruption issues, and that actually has also start has been made on that, which is a little bit of a surprise for me. I did not expect that in the budget, though hints had been given by the Prime Minister a little earlier.
Can I hold you?
Happening.
Can
so
I hold
in that sense, according to the benchmark which I
No, you seem to therefore be seeing it as a positive. You seem to be seeing that on the benchmarks that you have set, there is a positive. Am I clear on that? 10 seconds?
So
Am I right?
Absolutely. So I would say it's a good, it's a good budget.
It's a good budget because the benchmarks that you believe have been met to some extent. Yogendra Yadav, before I take a break, a quick reaction. We are hearing from your colleague, Mrs. Sahai, who's in our studios, that the farmer has been let down. The government says, in fact, just to the contrary, the Prime Minister says, I've reached out to the rural poor and the farmer. Are you simply making a political statement when you say that the farmer's concerns have not been met? And importantly, political funding, an area that you and others have also spoken about, the Prime Minister has taken a first step, or the Finance Minister has taken a first step.
Rajdeep, I agree with many of the analysts and therefore reach exactly the opposite conclusion. I agree it's a Muninji's budget, it is a bureaucrat's budget, the politician hasn't done very much to it, and it is business as usual budget. Now in a normal year, viewed from the top, that's all right, that's what you should do. But in an unusual year like this, where there is a very severe effect of demonetization and the farmers have taken the hit, viewed from their point of view, business as usual is the worst news you could get. My colleague Avik Sahai has already given facts, figures, to demonstrate that this whole thing about this having done anything for agriculture is complete myth, and I'm absolutely astonished as to how the government year after year manages to create this publicity about agriculture without giving anything. If they were to do it about stock market, you people in studios will take this government apart completely. But on agriculture, anyone can get away by sheer verbosity. On political corruption, I must sound a note of caution and dissent. And this is not vis-a-vis the government, because the government has simply implemented what the Election Commission said. I think it's a major, major mistake. It's not doing anything at all. And once again, the government and general propaganda seems to have hoodwinked a lot of intelligent people. This limit, the real issue was not what should be the limit of individual contribution, whether it's 20,000, make it 2,000, make it 1,000. It's not going to make any difference. Remember, there were no contributions in the first place. Someone was sitting with 100 crore rupees. Someone called a CA and said, yaar, isme 20,000 se niche ke dikha dena. CA did the job. Tomorrow you reduce it to 2,000. The same 100 crore rupees, the same CA will be called and say, yaar, is baar 2,000 se niche dikha dena.
But it's a start.
Exactly the same thing. So it would achieve zero result. The issue is, no, it's not a start at all. It would have been a start if the government said, let us put a ceiling to how much a political party can receive from such sources. If the government had said, let us stop this exemption, allow people to receive cash, but give me name and phone number of whoever you receive this cash from, That would have been a start.
Okay.
What we have right now is a very ill-thought proposal. I don't blame the government because it's the election commission, but many a times very well-intentioned and very poorly thought designs dominate political reforms. This is one of those things.
Let me leave it there for a moment. I want to take a break, step back a bit. We'll be joined by many more voices. I'll get final words from all our panelists because I want to understand the big picture. What, therefore, should be the big takeaway at the end of this long day? Has this budget in any way also influenced elections 2017? But more importantly, has it cushioned the country from the impact of demonetization? That's the final question I'll pose when we return.
I think he mentioned it would extend to rural India. He talked a lot about infrastructure in terms of rural India and rural spend.
Right.
And in terms of, I think, taxation, while it's welcome that he has reduced the tax rates for MSMEs and for startups to 25%, which is very welcome, I think he should have signaled something in that direction, at least for the larger corporates.
Do you agree at a time where industry has, post-demonetization, an element of uncertainty has crept in? Would you have liked to see a stronger signal to industry to kickstart growth and investment? And if so, what is the nature of that signal you would have liked to see?
Rajdeep, it's very difficult for me. I can disagree with the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, but I just cannot dare to disagree with Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. So the way you have asked the question, how can I disagree with Kiran, my very, very special friend? But more seriously, no, I don't agree with her. All of us want, various, auto industry had nothing in it, pharmaceutical wants this thing, everybody wants anything.
Welcome back to our budget special, Rate the Budget. I want to step back in this final segment to raise the question that has been on the lips of several people for weeks now. November 8th, the government announced demonetization. Post that, the impact it's had on the economy. Has the budget arrested the negative flow from demonetization? Has it given a sense of feel good? Has it brought the feel good factor back into the economy? That's what I'm going to ask, and that's a question I posed a short while ago also to Professor Bibek Debroy of the Niti Aayog. I asked him words being used today to describe the word. The positive word is stable, the negative word is conservative. Do you think this budget is stable, or do you think it's much too conservative, Professor Debroy?
I don't like these labels. I presume the negative one comes from you. I'd say that many of the expectations about the budget were somewhat unrealistic. Those are people's expectations because there's a certain continuity in the budget making process, and I think this budget builds on the various government initiatives that already existed, including the initiatives that had been announced in the preceding budgets.
But I must ask you this, Professor Debroy. You know, the sense is this budget took place in the backdrop of demonetization. People are still under burden of demonetization. There is still small and medium industries who've suffered. Will this budget now alleviate that pain? Has it come up with that big new idea to alleviate the pain that people have gone through?
I think one needs to spend a little bit of time on what one means by alleviating the pain. I think the expectation on the part of a lot of people was that across the board, tax rates would be reduced, there would be exemptions. The point, of course, is that there is a trade-off in terms of resources. Anything that is given away in the form of exemptions by reducing tax rates for people means a less amount of money that's available for capital investments. And one of the things this budget has done is increase capital investments, particularly in the transport sector. I would interpret that as also alleviating the pain. The trouble with many citizens is, I want my tax rate reduced, but simultaneously I want better trains, more safe trains, I want better airports, I want the national highways. I can't have all of those. So what this budget has done is, instead of squandering to purely myopic tax reduction issues, and by the way, taxes have been reduced for two categories at least, it has concentrated on things that build on the productive potential of the economy.
Okay, that was Bibek Debroy speaking to me a short while ago. Let's then settle it, gentlemen. You all have had a long day. Let's settle this question once and for all. Has this budget cushioned the country, the economy, from the ill effects of demonetization. I presume, Professor Arun Kumar, let me come to you as a critic of demonetization. You're not going to be satisfied at all.
Correct. You know, demonetization affected the unorganized sector the most.
Yes.
And that is a sector which has gone down. And if you look at the figures that the government has put out in the economic survey, they say without taking the unorganized sector into account, the rate of growth has fallen by about 1% or 0.5% thereabouts.
Yes.
So if you take the unorganized sector also into account, and if the rate of growth has fallen by 2% in these 5 months, then what you're talking about is a zero rate of growth roughly for this period from November on to the present. Now, if you project from that, you know, rather than from the average of the whole year, because that situation was not there before November 8th, then you need to project that the rate of growth that is there in the macro of the budget is not going to be achieved, in which case the taxes would not be collected, in which expenses would not be possible. And the other thing that this budget does is it believes that the tax incentives will work to create demand. But if you look at the amount of revenue foregone because of the tax concession, it's 22,000 crores, which is 0.01% of the GDP. That's not going to suddenly boost the demand where the rate of growth has dropped by something like 4 or 5%. You know, so therefore, this idea that you can give incentives and that will lead to a boost will not going to work, because industry is suffering from capacity utilization, and when there's low capacity utilization, investment doesn't come forth. Okay, so even if banks are flush with funds, that's not going to translate into more investment.
That's a good point. I just want to take that to Naina Lal Kidwai. Former HSBC head joining me now. Someone complained to me on Twitter, Sucheta Dalal complained, where are the women on your panel? So Naina Lal Kidwai, this isn't tokenism, but I want you to answer what Professor Arun Kumar is saying. Do you believe that the banking sector in particular will now be more generous with lending, will stimulate investment, or do you believe not enough has been done in this budget?
So to stimulate investment, you need financeable projects, you need growth, you need private sector that is vibrant and looking for money. So I think there is thrust in the budget towards growth. So it should play out that banks will lend, and the growth thrust comes from the investment in infrastructure, from affordable housing, all of which will lead to downstream effects through cement, steel and such industries. We will also see some consumption-led demand which will lead to growth, which will come from the money that is going to be flowing through into the rural sectors, into the farm sector, and also through the tax concessions at the lower tax level. So all of this will lead to some credit demand at the corporate end. At the retail end, I do believe we will again see some activity around demand for housing, people who will look to acquire their first homes as real estate prices are down and interest rates are low. So that could again be attractive in terms of credit offtake. But I do fear that the risk-taking appetite of banks is at a very low ebb, and rightly, because they've been stuck with very high NPAs.
Right.
And we will therefore not maybe see startup projects, first-time entrepreneurs, women who have traditionally felt that they have not been treated fairly when it comes to loans. This is not going to be a time where banks are going to be taking those risks.
Okay. So clearly it's a cautionary time that we live in. I just want to get final words from you. You called it a Munimji's budget. But, you know, affordable housing, I think one of the areas that we haven't focused on and should have been a positive of this budget. Do you believe that there will be, because real estate is one of the sectors that has slumped post-demonetization.
Yeah, I think
will it get a boost?
There it will get a boost. For affordable housing, a lot of things have been done. And particularly, there's another thing which has been done, which has not been spotted, is the fact that there's a lot of capital gains problems on secondary housing, and he's made some changes there. But let me say on the broader picture that I don't think the problem of investment is just due to demonetization. It has been there for over 2 years now, where we've had a steady decline in investment in the economy. What was disturbing was a statement by one of your industrialist interlocutors that the process now of recovery is delayed by a year.
That's right. So that, Subhashish Gangopadhyay, is a cautionary signal. To that extent, given the pressures, the economy, the global pressures, emerging market pressures, and the pressures that the country faces at the moment post-demonetization, could the finance minister have done more?
So you're always referring to demonetization, and
yes,
and talking around it, but we are not really looking at what this demonetization is, and that's not proper. See, the thing is that even if we look at the smaller denomination notes, right, and distribute it across all households, each household will have 10,889 rupees in 50, 100, 10, 20s. Right?
Yes.
So unless we believe that the large chunk of the small denomination notes are with businesses, right, there should be, theoretically speaking, there should be no restriction of demand at the lowest levels. So when we say that it is the informal sector people who are getting affected and all, what are we saying? We are saying that those who get paid in 500,000 rupee notes are the ones that are being affected, right? Because again, as I said, 10,889 and most of it is with business, because you are saying that the poor people cannot spend anything. So if that is what is happening, right, and I look at the casual laborers, I cannot find anybody who gets anything close to 500 rupees on a working day, right? So I don't understand from where this problem is coming, unless we say there is the small businesses which deal in cash that are affected. Now wait a minute.
The anecdotal evidence, Tirupur, Surat, Ludhiana, businesses have had taken a bad hit.
Please, listen.
The minimum wage for a skilled laborer in Delhi is 380 rupees a day.
That's less than 500. That's all I'm trying to say. And I cannot believe that the contractor gives him a 1,000 rupee note and the laborer gives the change back to get 380.
But
it does not happen
on a daily basis. He's paid on a weekly basis.
Okay,
so you
casual
believe,
laborers are paid on a daily basis. There are other weekly laborers who are paid on a weekly basis.
Okay.
Now wait a minute.
Yes.
Right? It's not. I'm not finished, because if we want to understand the demonetization problem, we have to get to where the problem lies.
Quickly.
Right? Give me time. The problem lies with the fact that there are some businesses that are dependent on cash. Construction is one of them, right? So it is these sectors that need to be affected, or that are affected and need to be addressed, right? And I'm not saying whether it is good or bad to deal in cash, right? But the point is that there are particular sectors that are affected. Those are the anecdotes you're hearing. Because people talked about supply chains.
Has this budget alleviated the distress those sectors are facing?
Yes.
You believe it has?
Yes, because that will be driven up by demand.
Okay, you've maintained this point. You believe this budget will stimulate demand. Final word, Ashok, sorry.
I think I'll back up what Subhashish was.
You should object.
Yes, 30 seconds, sorry.
Subhashish said, you see, Arun Jaitley, the minister, mentioned some figures. He mentioned that the old currency notes between rupees 2 lakh and 80 lakh were deposited in 1.1 crore accounts, with average deposit of 5.09 lakh rupees. And above 80 lakhs, the number of accounts is 1.5 lakh accounts, with average deposit of 3.31 crore.
Yes.
So these are not exactly the weaker sections of the people. And the second thing, I think we are assuming too much by thinking that demonetization is over. The jury is still out. I don't think Mr. Jaitley is collecting these figures out of academic interest. So the tax department is going to do something. So I think the game is far from over.
It's going to take a long time for the tax department to go through those figures to identify the people perhaps who have stored black money. I'm just wondering whether the places I go to, Ludhiana, Surat, Tirupur, there is genuine distress.
I know.
I am only asking whether today's budget has revived a feel-good factor in the economy or not.
The point is,
we could argue that it has not existed for the last 2 years. That's another matter.
No, I'm just making, let's keep
quickly, I have 30 seconds.
Paribus, don't assume other things. Just let's assume the demonetization per se. The most important, it's a huge gamble. This is a case where the government has taken a measure which has affected people's lives. It's not just
has the feel-good factor returned to the economy as a result of today? 10 seconds. I'm coming down to 10 seconds. I've run out of time.
People are saying we have suffered in silence. Now, show us the gain. And the government is on notice to show that they're catching some guys.
Okay, so the government is still on notice. Even at the end of today, the government is still on notice. Gentlemen, I think we've ended the program here. I think it's very clear that Arun Jaitley's budget is still under test. The jury is still out whether demonetization has actually benefited the economy or not, and whether this budget in particular has been able to cushion the people of the country from maybe the negatives of demonetization. Let's leave it there. Perhaps the best thing the budget has done is it hasn't done anything seriously wrong. Whether it's done something right or wrong, or whether it's a Munimji's budget, That we leave you to decide. I'm not going to rate the budget. I'm asking you to rate the budget. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.